joining us on the phone, Blaine Fowler. Welcome back from Europe, Blaine, and welcome back to this, this gauntlet of BYU questioning that we've had waiting for you, starting with this. What is better for BYU, a schedule like 2013 or 2014?
Well, a schedule like 2013 is great if you've got a veteran quarterback and you've got a veteran offensive line and you're up to the task. The problem for BYU was that schedule was probably a year or two too early. And so I think the schedule for this season is perfect for where they're at. They do now have a quarterback with a lot more experience. They have a line that is more experienced. And so they're going to be better. This schedule allows them to make some noise on a national basis, to win 10 or more games, and to set themselves up for a senior year with a schedule that's more like it was last year in 2015, a senior quarterback year for Taysom Hill. And so I look at it in blocks, and I look at this year as a setup year for next year. And if BYU's going to make some noise and get into a playoff and do those kinds of things, I think that they have to set the table this year to do it next year.
So which is better for BYU, you think? The 2013 or the 14? Like in general, the average schedule now for BYU.
No, I think it has to be somewhere in between. Although I truly believe that everyone I talk to is discounting this year's schedule way too much.
That was our conversation this morning.
Absolutely. It's a great schedule, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think the schedule has plenty of weight to it to put BYU in the national limelight. I think that if they win 11 games on this schedule, they're going to be in the top 10. If they go undefeated, they'll be in the top 10, Blaine? Yeah, I think they could be if they win 11. If they're only, and it depends on the team that they lose. So say they lose to Texas at Texas in the second week of the season, then they go on a roll and they finish and they win a bowl game and they end up 12-1, and Texas ends up being a team that's ranked in the top 10 or 15. BYU can be in the top 10. They could be in the top 10 with an 11-win season with this schedule. So that's saying something. We had years in the Mountain West Conference where had they been undefeated, I don't think they could have been in the top 10. So I think they could win 11 and be in the top 10, but the teams that they beat have to do their job. Houston has to live up to their billing this year. Central Florida, who is supposed to be really, really good this year, has to be good this year and win their games. Nevada has to be back up to their standards. Boise State has to be back up to their standards. But there's enough quality opponents on this schedule that are projected to have good seasons that if BYU goes 11-1, they can still be a top 10 team. Now, when have we said that on a BYU schedule? And last year, was it really realistic? I mean, we talked at the beginning of the year, and we were saying, gosh, if they could win 9 games, it would be just remarkable with this schedule.
Yeah.
So now this year we're saying if they, we expect them to win 10, maybe 11. I don't know, maybe those expectations are too high. This schedule has a lot of really good quarterback and receiver combinations coming back that are going to throw the football over the place, and BYU's got to be prepared for that. So it's maybe not quite as easy as people think, and if these teams hold up the way they should with the talent they have coming back, with veteran quarterbacks and receivers, then I think BYU can make some noise nationally. Now, I don't think with an undefeated season, they may still be looking on the outside of being in that top 4.
Yeah.
But I think a 10, 11, or 12-win season this year puts them in the national limelight, gets them ranked in the top 15 preseason the following year, and then that's their big opportunity.
Blaine, the top 10 feels like a stretch for me just because BYU doesn't have the overall quality that maybe they had last year. 2013, you had good names. Those teams didn't pan out maybe like BYU hoped. There wasn't any, elite team there. Wisconsin, Notre Dame ended up being pretty good. But this year, BYU only plays 3 P5s versus 7 P5s last year, and 2 of those are Virginia and Cal. So where does BYU have to definitely make its mark in maybe a game or 2, in your opinion?
Okay, so they can make a huge statement if they beat Texas, but yeah. I think that's going to be the most difficult game on their schedule.
By any margin. Just win the game.
It's on the road. I think Texas is going to be significantly better this year. Because let's face it, guys, Texas has talent, and they had talent last year. If you want to go man for man, Texas was had more talent than BYU by a mile last year.
A lot of teams
and they will again this year. Yeah, and Texas had top 10 talent last year. That's why coaches get fired and defensive coordinators get fired the week after games and those kinds of things. Because when we were getting ready to do that game for BYU TV, I'm looking at their 2 deep, and they don't have a player that at least they didn't last year in their 2 deep. So we're talking 22 on offense and defense that weren't ranked in the top 5 in the country at their position coming out of high school. BYU didn't have one player ranked in the top 5 in the country at their position coming out of practice on their 2D. And BYU beats them, so it's not always the team with the most talent.
Right.
But I do think that the staff that they've assembled there is a staff that is going to get more out of that talented Texas. So that's a tough game, and I think Texas is going to have a good season. So if BYU were able to get a win by any margin, I don't care if it's a 1-point victory coming down the stretch, that bolts them into the limelight. So that's the single most important game on the schedule. Now, I happen to think Central Florida is going to be really good again this year. I know that Bortles has not graduated, went out early and is an NFL guy now, but there was enough talent around him last year that was a very good football team. They've got great team speed. I think they're going to have a good record again and surprise people. So that's another important game because that's going to be a game if they win is against a team that maybe makes some noise on a national basis. But every game is important. You can't go and lose at Connecticut. Connecticut, to me, is like the Virginia game last year. It's a team.
It's almost less.
BYU should win. Virginia had no business being on the field with BYU last year. And they gave that football game away. And I know it was unique circumstances with the weather and all of that. But that's what BYU can't afford. So in a sense, those games become just as important as the Texas game because those are games you're supposed to win and not only win, but you're supposed to win by a large margin. And if you eke one out at UConn, then the people that vote in the polls go, well, gosh, maybe they're not that good. But if you blow UConn out, they go, okay, that's what we expected. Then they beat Texas by 1, and people go, oh, man, wow, we better pay attention to this team. And so I'd say Texas is the most important game, but then I think the games where they're supposed to dominate, they have to dominate. They need to dominate UConn. They need to dominate Middle Tennessee. They need to dominate Savannah State and win big.
Blaine Fowler, BYU TV sports analyst and former BYU quarterback, a member of the 1984 national championship team on BYU Sports Nation. Today, Taysom Hill, one of 39 players named to the Davey O'Brien Award preseason watch list. Blaine, how legitimate is Taysom Hill's, candidacy for an award like the Davey O'Brien? Like, are you buying into the Heisman hype, or is it a year too early?
Well, it's probably a year too early, but in the offense that he's going to run, he has an opportunity to put up some amazing numbers. If they can get his passing percentage up where it needs to be, and he becomes a guy that throws for 3,000 yards and rushes for 1,000 yards, and really, really, is a quality player doing it, I think he can make some noise. But I think that completion percentage has to be up.
What should it be at? So it needs to be at 65. Okay.
Yeah, it needs to be 65%. His touchdown interception ratio, needs to be that. It should be 3-to-1 type of a thing at least.
3-to-1 would be amazing.
That's what it should be. So you look at so think about this. When BYU was going into that Washington game last year, you remember we were breaking down that game. Keith Price, who wasn't a Davey O'Brien Award finalist, was completing 65% of his passes. He threw for 2,800 yards. He had 20 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Taysom Hill has as much talent or more than him. He needs to be at least that efficient. And I think he has a chance to throw for 3. And the key that he has that running ability. And, ever since the NFL has had a couple of quarterbacks the last couple of years that are dual threat guys, people are paying more attention to the value of that. And so they're looking at guys that can run around and make plays. And San Francisco's made hay with that type of an offense in the NFL now. Russell Wilson doesn't run around quite as much at Seattle, but he still is a mobile guy that runs around.
When he needs to.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, a guy that can do both has more value, and people are putting more value on that. So a dual threat like Taysom has a chance to make some noise. Now, does he have a chance to win that award this year? They would have to have a special season. So that would take him having a marquee signature win. Now, Ty Detmer, he had the Miami win. Well, how about going and getting a win at Texas to vault you into the national conscience? So, conscience. And so that's kind of what has to happen for Taysom. But like this team, I think he has a chance to set the table where he has a top 5 finish this year, and then next year they go out and make a ton of noise, and that's his best opportunity. I hate to call this a setup year because it's an important year, but that's kind of how things go. When Boise State was having their run, years when they were playing in BCS bowl games, they had great years the year before, and then returning quarterbacks in Kellen Moore to kind of launch them into early high preseason rankings to get them in a position to be in that type of a game at the end of the year. And so you almost have to have a setup year and then a big year. And last year can't be considered a setup year for BYU.
And Detmer's big year was junior, ironically enough, and started as a sophomore, sometimes as a freshman a little bit. But yesterday we talked about the home run derby, the home run players for BYU. I know you've got some in mind as we look at kind of all-time. We talked about this year kind of projecting a little bit. But who are some of the guys, I guess, all-time, in your opinion, Blaine, that are some of the biggest home run players or athletes at BYU?
I was thinking about this because I was supposed to be on yesterday. I'm going to apologize to you guys again. I got stuck in a meeting and I couldn't get out.
All good, brother.
I felt terrible. But anyhow, I've been thinking about it the whole night before. And so by definition, it's a person that can finish or go all the way on any play, a threat to make a huge play at any time. Because a home run is a play that in baseball, the ball comes off the bat and all of a sudden everybody stands up in the stands and it just changes the game. And so that's the definition I used. Is that the definition you guys were using?
Big playability.
Crowd pleaser. Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
So I picked a couple
Distance.
out from multiple sports that you guys may or may not have thought about. You have to tell me you thought about them. So in baseball, there were some guys there right when I was there that were unbelievable. We had Wally Joyner and Corey Snyder in baseball at the same time. And I was at a game
was ranked number one at one point in '83.
I was at a game when Corey Snyder hit a home run that came off the bat, and not a player on the defense moved 1 inch. Like the left fielder just stood there. It was so far over his head he didn't even take his hands off of his knees. And the ball landed on the steps of the Marriott Center.
Oh. It landed on the steps of the Marriott Center?
It landed on the steps in the Marriott Center.
I've heard about these moonshots.
Oh. And so now this is the same Corey Snyder that when he was playing on the U.S. Olympic team hit one out of Comiskey Park. I'm not talking into the upper deck. He hit it over the roof in the outfield.
Oh.
And so you got to count Corey Snyder and you got to count Wally Joyner because it's very applicable. They're true home run hitters. And I went to a baseball game. Wally was playing for the Angels, and he had turned Angels Park into Wally World. We were down broadcasting a game in Texas, and he had a game against the Rangers. And so we ran into him. I said, hey, come to the game. And we were talking to him, and they were down big. He's coming out to the on-deck circle, and he kind of points over at us like, okay, watch this. And he just stroked one into right field, over the right field fence. So he called his own shot before he went up to the plate. But those two in baseball, to me, were unbelievable. And during the heyday, the renaissance, the whatever you want to call it, Camelot of BYU baseball. So, and I don't know if you guys talked about those guys at all. In basketball, there's the obvious Jimmer and Danny, but there's a couple of guys that I thought of that were guys that game just not going the way you want it. Somebody's got to just make a play that brings the crowd back into it. And I thought of Jeff Chapman and Timo Sirlainen. And the reason
nice.
The reason I thought of Jeff Chapman was at any time he catch the ball on the baseline, go baseline, take the ball back, scratch his shoulder blades with it, and throw down a thunderous two-hand dunk right on top of somebody's head. And it would just change the game. Immediately, 23,000 on their feet in the Marriott Center, and we're back in the game. And then Timo, the flying fin, at any time of the game, you could be coming down in a fast break, and a point guard would just throw the ball up anywhere around the glass, and Timo would come flying in with his 40-plus inch vertical jump at 6'6", and just grab it and do all manner of alley-oop throwdown, sideways, slantways, crossways, you name it. Timo would throw it down on alley-oops, and so to me, those guys are exciting. Bring people to their feet. Players. Did you guys? I bet you didn't think of Timo.
We didn't,
right?
but you know that you're aging yourself, right, Blaine?
I know. I'm just and hey, by the way, these guys played after I played. These are guys I just covered games for.
I'm just teasing.
So I'm gonna give you a guy in football now that goes way back before me, but was a childhood idol, and that's Chris Farasopoulos. And you guys don't remember him, but he was one of the premier punt returners in college football at BYU, and then he went on to have a great career with the New York Jets. And here I was, an LDS kid growing up in New York, and I had a BYU guy playing for the New York Jets and was one of the premier punt returners in the National Football League.
Jets, Jets.
Yes. So Chris Farasopoulos led to Vi Sikahema, who led to James Dye, and so those guys were lightning in a bottle in punt returns. You know what I'm excited about? I think we might have that again this year on this football team. either James Dye's son, who may be able to get that electric back in the return game, or how about Blackman?
Yep.
Returning kicks and
I was
punts.
just going to ask you, who's the hero play this year for you?
Yeah, I think one of those two guys is going to catch all of our imaginations again in the kick game, and we're going to be excited about it again. We're every time a team has to punt or kick off, we're thinking, wait a minute, we can score on this play. This could be a scoring play for us. So I'm really excited to see how that goes this year, because I think the combination of the guys they have, especially with Blackman and Dye, we could be back to having a big-time threat like we had when we had Farasopoulos or Sikahema or Dye. So, and I thought of a couple of others. So in volleyball, Ozzie Antoinetti is my all-time favorite.
Oh, he was the best.
It's like at any time he's going to come from the back line and just go into some type of crazy flight pattern where you would go, wait a minute, was he actually floating, or was he what was he doing? How did he stay up there that long?
He broke his hand or wrist and played with like this club. So it's just like
he was unbelievable to watch, because he certainly wasn't the height you would normally expect an outside hitter to be, and he just dominated. So I think he was a home run hitter in volleyball. And then there's two track athletes that we got to mention. One of the greatest of all time, Frankie Fredericks, and then Leonard Miles.
Absolutely. Silver medals.
Did you guys talk about Frankie yesterday at all?
We went more projecting this season as opposed to all time, so we did not bring up those guys.
Well, Frankie is, how many guys does BYU have that have ever come through the program that had a claim at multiple times that they were the fastest human in the world?
Frank Fredericks.
One,
right. So if you want to talk about the greatest athletes in the history of BYU, I mean, Danny Ainge was unbelievable. He was unbelievable. Steve Young, unbelievable. But they were never, I don't know if we could ever say undoubtedly best in the world, period. And we can say that about Frankie Fredericks a couple of times during his career. At one time, he had run more sub-10-second 100-meter dashes than anybody in history. 4 silver medals, 2 in the 100 and 2 in the 200. World championships, world records. And we forget that he ran at BYU. BYU's not known for sprinters, but
he's our second greatest athlete from Africa.
Yeah, and then Leonard Miles Mills.
No, he's the best.
Also.
And then Ziggy second.
Yes, exactly. That's right. You got it. And then Leonard Miles Mills, who was an NCAA champion in the 100 and 200. I remember talking to Frankie, and he said that when Leonard got in the blocks, he says, you talk about explosive. When Leonard would get in the blocks, he said he's the fastest human in the world in 15 to 20 meters. No question in Frankie's mind. He says because if they could run a 20-meter dash, Leonard would have been multiple-time world champion. And because he said it would be so violent, him coming out of the blocks, and so explosive that it would scare you. You had to focus if you were running against him, because he would come out so fast and so hard it would wreck your own concentration in a race. And he was a big time athlete. But I think Frankie Fredericks, we don't talk about how great he was enough. And certainly you want to talk about a home run hitter. Anytime he got in the blocks, it would bring people to their feet. And one of the greatest of all time in world history in track.
Blaine, it is good to have you back from Europe. We're glad that you survived. Clearly, you needed an outlet to discuss BYU athletics, and we are glad to present that opportunity to you. So please,
it made me reminisce, so it was all good.
Please come back and do it with us again soon.
All right, guys, good to talk to you.